Look closely at the device resting on the glass table. The screen is black. The room is silent. But through an infrared lens, the truth bleeds out. A silent network packet, untraceable and encrypted, just collided with the receiver. Instantly, the facial recognition matrix flares to life. The microphone engages, recording the ambient hum of the room. No notifications sounded. No alarms tripped. You did not touch the glass. The device was just hijacked, in complete silence. Right now, the piece of glass and silicon sitting inches from your face is an open microphone. You probably think you are secure. You do not click suspicious links. You never download strange applications. I need to shatter that illusion immediately. We are operating in the year 2026, and the rules of engagement have changed. Your caution is entirely irrelevant. A zero-click exploit means your device is weaponized in milliseconds without a single prompt. We're going to conduct a step-by-step forensic autopsy of the most sophisticated cyberweapon ever deployed against civilian populations. I'm handing you the investigator's lens. We will pull apart the digital paper trail and examine the microscopic anomalies left behind in the memory logs. You are going to learn how to spot the invisible tripwires of the modern digital surveillance state. In a world where privacy is a commercial myth, this intelligence might just keep your data secure. Step into any crowded subway car during the morning commute. Hundreds of people stand shoulder to shoulder, staring blankly into their glowing screens. To the naked eye, it is just a quiet, isolated crowd. But if you visualize the electromagnetic spectrum, the air is boiling. Invisible radio frequencies are ricocheting between devices and cellular towers in a chaotic, high-speed crossfire. Let us isolate one specific target in this underground transit matrix and track the incoming signal. We push past the reinforced glass screen, dropping down to the microscopic architecture of the silicon processor. In the early 2000s, the protocol of hacking was fundamentally different. The attacker required your active participation. They needed a compromised phishing email, a downloaded executable file, or a maliciously crafted link. But the forensic evidence from 2021 proved that this entire paradigm of user-dependent infection is completely obsolete. Watch the malicious payload hit the device's perimeter. It does not try to break the encryption algorithms. Instead, the code slips through the system's security gates like a microscopic liquid seeping around the hinges of a heavy bank vault. A zero-click exploit functions by weaponizing fundamental logic flaws. It attacks the exact mechanism the operating system uses to process incoming network data, striking the underlying architecture long before the user interface is ever notified. The forensic data reveals that the most devastating zero-click strike in recent history targeted the iMessage platform. The architects of this cyberweapon did not send a complex software virus. They sent a ghost. The payload was a maliciously crafted PDF document, surgically altered and disguised to look exactly like a standard looping GIF image file. On the surface, it appeared to be a harmless piece of media, a mundane transaction perfectly camouflaged in the daily flow of digital traffic. Here's where the trap closes, exploiting the system's desire for speed. Modern messaging applications are designed for immediate gratification. To save fractions of a second, the software automatically renders incoming image files in the background, preparing them for display before you even open the application. Because of this automated protocol, the operating system processed the corrupted data packet without the target ever touching the screen or acknowledging a single notification. This silent, invisible rendering process gave the hidden code the exact environment it needed to detonate. The payload began to systematically rewrite the device's volatile memory. By executing arbitrary code inside the background process, the exploit bypassed all user permissions. It secured a direct path to the kernel, the absolute core of the operating system. Within seconds, the attacker gained complete administrative control over the phone's hardware, and the owner felt absolutely nothing. Think about the gravity of this digital crime scene. The entire security infrastructure of a massive tech corporation was dismantled by a silent image file. As an investigator analyzing the server logs, you realize the fundamental rules of digital forensics have been rewritten. There is no suspicious link left in the inbox. There is no rogue application hiding in the system folders. The paper trail is completely ephemeral, leaving security teams chasing shadows in the volatile memory stack. This is the cold reality of weaponized mathematics. We are not looking at a tool designed by amateur hackers in a basement. This is an apex predator of the digital ecosystem, engineered with the precision of a military strike. Once the kernel is compromised, every encrypted message, every private photograph, and every geographic coordinate is stripped of its protection. The device in your pocket is instantly transformed from a communication tool into a highly efficient, hostile informant. You invest in the most secure hardware on the market. You rely on end-to-end encryption protocols, believing your biometric locks and complex passwords form an impenetrable digital fortress. But this forensic autopsy proves that your defensive strategy is pointed in the wrong direction. You are guarding the main entrance, while the architecture of the building itself is actively betraying you. The true threat does not bother testing the strength of your passwords or the vigilance of your habits. We have arrived at what forensic analysts call the locked door paradox. You went out and bought the heaviest, most expensive deadbolt in the world. You secured your digital life behind layers of hardened steel. But the intruder did not pick your lock, and they did not break your key. Instead, they found a way to turn themselves into liquid, slipping silently through the microscopic gaps in the door frame itself. The question is not how they got in. The question is how we catch a digital ghost. You catch a ghost by measuring the cold draft it leaves behind. Down in the windowless lab, surrounded by the hum of server racks, the forensic cyber analyst locks the compromised smartphone inside a Faraday cage. This heavy metal mesh box instantly severs the device from the outside world, blocking all cellular and Wi-Fi signals. The bleeding stops here. We isolate the patient on the operating table, knowing that the weapon we are looking for is actively trying to erase itself from existence. The investigator's protocol dictates a cold, mechanical detachment. The target device is functionally a crime scene, but the killer is not hiding in the physical hardware. Military-grade spyware like Pegasus is engineered to operate almost exclusively within the device's volatile memory, or RAM. This is a tactical masterstroke. If the paranoid user simply reboots their phone, the power cycles, the volatile memory clears, and the primary infection vanishes into the ether without a single trace. The perfect crime is a mathematical myth. Every intrusion, no matter how elegant, forces a reaction from the host environment. In cyberspace, you do not look for the intruder directly. You look for the memory the intruder desperately tried to erase. The analyst stares at the curved monitors, extracting an encrypted backup of the entire file system. We are not searching for malicious code. We are hunting for the absolute negative space that the unseen payload occupied during the breach. We rely on a fundamental vulnerability in modern operating systems: They are obsessive, neurotic record keepers. A smartphone is constantly logging its own existence to optimize battery life and performance. Every single application crash, every microscopic network connection, and every fractional drop in voltage is aggressively archived. The analyst zeroes in on deep, hidden system files, specifically targeting an encrypted database known as datausage.sqlite. This database is the digital equivalent of an unfiltered security camera. It records the precise energy consumption of every active process. The analyst parses millions of lines of hex code, scanning for a glitch in the matrix. Finding Pegasus means locating microscopic anomalies in this relentless stream of data. A suspicious process name appearing out of nowhere, drawing power for exactly 3 seconds, and then abruptly terminating itself before the user ever touches the glass. The evidence is agonizingly mundane. It looks like a fractional spike in data transmission occurring exactly at 3 o'clock in the morning while the device is charging quietly on a nightstand. To the untrained eye, it is just background noise, a routine software update, or an idle synchronization. But to the forensic investigator, that tiny surge in battery drain is the microscopic footprint of an apex predator actively exfiltrating an archive of encrypted text messages. Manually parsing this mountain of data is a mathematical impossibility. The human brain cannot spot a single anomalous kilobyte hidden inside a 50-gigabyte backup. To automate the hunt, researchers at Amnesty International's security lab developed a specialized forensic instrument. They called it the Mobile Verification Toolkit, or MVT. This software does not look for the virus itself. It scans the encrypted backups to find the permanent digital fingerprints left behind by temporary files. The MVT operates like a chemical reagent at a physical crime scene, making the invisible bloodstains glow under ultraviolet light. It rapidly cross-references the phone's internal logs against a known registry of malicious domains and suspicious network behaviors. The analyst runs the toolkit, watching the terminal window cascade with thousands of automated queries. The goal is to catch the spyware in a lie, exposing the temporary cache files it failed to clean up during its execution. The architecture of this spyware relies heavily on systemic camouflage. Pegasus frequently spoofs legitimate, native system processes to blend into the background radiation of the phone. It renames its malicious modules to perfectly mimic standard operating system functions, hiding in plain sight. If the security protocol scans the active processes, it sees what appears to be a normal web browser, or a standard Bluetooth driver operating exactly as expected. The disguise is nearly flawless. But digital forgery is an imperfect science. While the spyware can steal the identity of a legitimate process, it struggles to perfectly replicate the historical metadata. The analyst finally isolates the anomaly. A system process that claims to be a native application, but the MVT reveals it lacks the correct cryptographic signature. It is a tiny, fractional metadata error, a slight misspelling in the internal registry that shatters the illusion and confirms the total system compromise. Finding that single error is a moment of profound, chilling clarity in the basement lab. The hum of the cooling racks fades into the background as the analyst highlights the corrupted timestamp. This is the smoking gun. The investigator has successfully cornered a weapon that cost millions of dollars to develop. The data proves the device was silently hijacked, its microphone hot-wired, and its camera remotely activated, all while sitting untouched on a target's desk. The implications of this metadata mismatch extend far beyond a single compromised device. By mapping the precise timestamps of these anomalies, the investigator can reconstruct the attacker's operational timeline. We can see exactly when the invisible payload was delivered, how long it maintained uninterrupted control over the device, and the exact millisecond it initiated data extraction. The forensic timeline transforms a vague sense of paranoia into a mathematically provable attack sequence. This autopsy requires dissecting the digital corpse with extreme precision. The analyst is effectively reading the memory of a ghost. Every deleted file, every overwritten sector leaves a microscopic scar on the flash storage. The MVT extracts these digital scars, compiling an irrefutable log of the covert intrusion. It is a grueling, unglamorous process of staring at hexadecimal strings until the operational pattern of the cyberweapon finally reveals itself in the static noise. The reality of modern cyber warfare is completely detached from the cinematic fantasy. There are no flashing red screens or loud alarm bells. The breach is totally silent, and the extraction is invisible. The investigator sitting at the Faraday cage is the only line of defense standing between total surveillance and the truth. Through sheer brute force analysis and mechanical deduction, the analyst has forced the shadow out into the light, exposing the raw mechanics of the zero-click strike. But identifying the weapon is only the first phase of the investigative protocol. We have successfully isolated the forensic signature of the attack, mapped its memory footprint, and confirmed the devastating scope of the breach. The ghost has a face, and it is built from highly sophisticated, weaponized mathematics. The critical question now shifts from how the device was compromised to the terrifying architecture of the exploit itself. We have the fingerprints. Now, we must examine the gun. The fingerprints are secured. The memory anomalies map out a terrifying, mathematically perfect point of entry. As I watch the forensic cyber analyst stare at these hexadecimal strings, the next protocol is an autopsy of the weapon itself. We are no longer looking for the traces of the intruder. I need you to see the exact mechanism that bypassed the most heavily fortified mobile operating system on the planet. Look at the data structure. It resembles a massive, highly regulated digital library where every incoming file is strictly categorized and checked. But the attacker did not just break the code. They used the phone's own internal logic against it, turning the defense system into the weapon. This is where the standard rules of cybersecurity collapse. The threat is not an external brute force attack. It is a microscopic Trojan horse. The analyst isolates the exact point of failure. Researchers designated this specific zero-click attack as the forced entry exploit. The vulnerability was not found in an obscure third-party application, but deep within the device's native architecture, specifically an image rendering library known as Core Graphics. This is the foundational system responsible for displaying every visual element on your screen. The weapon's payload was disguised as a harmless graphic file, but its true nature was entirely different. The attackers resurrected a forgotten, highly specific compression standard from the 1990s called JBIG2. They crafted a corrupted image file designed to exploit a deeply buried mathematical flaw in how the modern operating system allocated memory for this ancient legacy format. Through the analyst's monitor, the sequence visualizes as a systemic collapse. The moment the message arrives, the Core Graphics library attempts to render the hidden JBIG2 file. The mathematical flaw triggers an intentional, calculated overflow of the memory buffer. The system attempts to read data that is too large for the assigned space, causing the digital library's indexing system to go completely insane. This memory overflow was not designed to crash the phone. It was precision engineered to hijack the operating system's reality. By manipulating these memory errors, the exploit executed what computer scientists call a Turing-complete attack. The malicious file essentially began rewriting the rules of the library from the inside, constructing an entirely new, independent, and invisible computer environment. This is the anomaly that chills the forensic expert to the bone. The malware built its own processor architecture out of the operating system's failures. It is a ghost machine, operating independently of your device's security protocols. Because this fake environment exists entirely within a legitimate rendering process, the antivirus guards see absolutely nothing suspicious. The system believes it is just loading an image. Inside this microscopic, simulated computer, the scale of the engineering is staggering. The attackers mathematically constructed over 70,000 virtual logic gates using nothing but carefully placed system crashes. This digital architecture allowed the spyware to run its own complex search algorithms, systematically hunting for the keys to the device's encrypted storage without triggering a single security alarm. The investigator watches the packet captures confirm the impossible. This tiny, invisible machine within a machine operates with absolute impunity. It silently unpicks the deadbolts to your emails, your encrypted chat logs, your microphone, and your camera. The user is completely oblivious, scrolling through social media or sleeping with the phone on the nightstand, while a 70,000 gate processor quietly strips away their life. Analyzing the sheer density of this code requires a re-evaluation of the global threat landscape. When the security engineers at Google's Project Zero finally intercepted and decompiled this payload, their assessment was unprecedented. They described the forced entry exploit not merely as a virus, but as a terrifying work of art. They classified it as one of the most technically sophisticated cyber attacks ever documented in history. Calling a weapon a work of art is a bitter pill for a forensic analyst to swallow, but the architecture demands respect. This level of mathematical precision is not the product of a bored teenager in a basement. The protocol requires an intimate, godlike understanding of how silicon and software interact at the most fundamental level. We are tracking an adversary with effectively unlimited time, funding, and intellect. This invisible architecture changes the definition of a targeted attack. Your device is a fortress, yes, but the forced entry method proves that every fortress has a structural resonance frequency. The attackers simply found the exact mathematical pitch required to shatter the walls from the inside out. They turned your high-end security features into the very machinery that executes your total surveillance. Look at the diagnostic timeline on the forensic monitor. 0 seconds. The silent packet arrives. 0.2 seconds. The memory buffer overflows. 0.5 seconds. The 70,000 virtual logic gates compile. 0.8 seconds. The ghost machine achieves root access. Before you can even reach across the desk to check a notification that never sounds, your digital autonomy has been completely neutralized. There is no patch for human oversight, and legacy code is the ultimate vulnerability. We build our shiny, modern digital lives on top of foundation stones laid in the 1990s. The developers who wrote the core graphics library never anticipated it would be weaponized by state-sponsored intelligence agencies. It is a digital supply chain attack, hidden deep within the blind spots of the world's wealthiest tech companies. The forensic autopsy is complete. I've laid the gun disassembled on the table, its terrifying mechanics fully exposed. But weapons of this caliber, requiring tens of millions of dollars in research and development, are not deployed randomly. If this is the sophistication of the bullet, we must turn our attention to the sniper. The investigation now requires us to follow the paper trail out of the code and into the boardroom. The investigation leads us out of the silicon and into the sterile, climate-controlled silence of a corporate boardroom. Through the glass walls, you see programmers casually typing, sipping sparkling water, insulated from the chaos their code unleashes. We are hunting the sniper, but we do not find a lone operator in a ghillie suit. Instead, we find a pristine corporate headquarters with a human resources department and an aggressive quarterly profit margin. You have been conditioned to fear the rogue hacker in a dark basement, the anarchist typing furiously in a hoodie. But that is a Hollywood myth masking a much more terrifying reality. The most dangerous cyber threat on the planet is fully incorporated, pays taxes, and holds shareholder meetings. The sheer capital required to engineer the invisible ghost machine we just autopsied cannot be raised on the dark web. It requires a Wall Street business model. I followed the transaction logs and offshore shell companies directly to the Mediterranean coast. In 2010, a group of elite operatives founded a private cyber intelligence firm known as the NSO Group. The founders were not rogue outlaws. They were highly decorated veterans of Unit 8200, the premier signals intelligence branch of the Israel Defense Forces. They took military-grade espionage tactics and simply privatized them. Unit 8200 is the equivalent of the American National Security Agency, a factory for the sharpest cryptographic minds on the planet. When these engineers leave the military, their specialized knowledge of zero-day exploits becomes an immensely valuable commodity. They recognized that every government in the world desperately wanted the ability to silently monitor mobile devices, but very few had the technical infrastructure to build the tools themselves. NSO Group did not classify their new product as a simple software application. On the official paperwork, Pegasus is registered under a chilling legal category, a cyber munition. From a regulatory standpoint, there is absolutely no difference between exporting this invisible string of code and selling a squadron of F-16 fighter jets or a shipment of guided missiles. The export protocol requires the direct authorization of the Israeli Ministry of Defense. This classification shatters the illusion of random malware. We are dealing with an internationally recognized weapons system governed by geopolitical alliances and defense treaties. The boardroom executives sipping sparkling water are arms dealers navigating international arms trafficking laws. But unlike physical munitions, a cyber weapon leaves no crater, requires no logistics supply chain, and can cross sovereign borders in a matter of milliseconds. The corporate brochure presents a sterile, noble narrative. The executives claim their $50 million software is sold exclusively to strictly vetted, allied government intelligence agencies. The official protocol insists Pegasus is a surgical tool designed for a singular, moral purpose: preventing catastrophic terror attacks, tracking human trafficking syndicates, and dismantling major transnational drug cartels. It is marketed as the ultimate shield for the innocent. But an open-source intelligence investigation reveals a glaring contradiction beneath that polished public relations pitch. When I began pulling the corporate registry data, the clean structure dissolved into a labyrinth of opaque financial vehicles. The NSO Group is shielded by a dense network of private equity firms and international shell companies. It is a corporate Russian nesting doll, specifically engineered to obscure ultimate ownership and evade legal liability. Why does a legitimate defense contractor need the financial architecture of a money laundering syndicate? Because the concept of vetted governments is highly elastic in the shadow economy of digital espionage. When you sell a weaponized ghost machine to an intelligence agency, you lose control of the trigger. The labyrinth of holding companies ensures that when the weapon is inevitably misused, the corporate executives remain insulated from international war crimes tribunals. The financial stakes of this shadow economy are staggering. A single deployment contract for the Pegasus system can easily exceed $50 million. This is not a flat fee for the software. It is a subscription model for sustained, zero-click access to a targeted network. The client pays for the maintenance of the invisible architecture, the continuous updates required to bypass new security patches, and the absolute secrecy of the infiltration. This astronomical price tag creates a terrifying distortion in the global cybersecurity market. When a brilliant, independent software engineer discovers a critical flaw in your smartphone's operating system, they face a moral and financial dilemma. They can report the bug to the manufacturer for a meager $10,000 bounty, or they can sell it quietly on the gray market to a defense contractor for $2 or $3 million. Capitalism always wins. The market dynamics actively discourage digital safety. There is a massive, legalized financial incentive to discover, hoard, and weaponize the zero-day vulnerabilities inside the devices you rely on every single day. The tech giants are trying to build higher walls, but the shadow industry is backed by billions of dollars in sovereign wealth funds, highly motivated to keep those hidden doors wide open. Your digital privacy is not a right. It is a market inefficiency. We have exposed the corporate machinery and the $50 million price tag. The weapon is armed, legally sanctioned, and deployed across the globe. But an arms dealer does not pull the trigger. They simply hand the loaded gun to the client and look the other way. The true horror of the Pegasus system is not found in the sleek boardroom where it was sold. To understand the real collateral damage, I had to find the leaked database of the people they were aiming at. Opening that database felt like staring into the barrel of a loaded gun. The corporate alibi was airtight. Catch the terrorists, stop the cartels. But to an open-source intelligence journalist sitting in a darkened hotel room, the raw data file arriving on an encrypted laptop tells a very different story. The screen illuminates a messy desk scattered with burner phones, projecting the cold, hard evidence of a global lie. Every intelligence operation has a paper trail, even the invisible ones. The narrative sold in those sleek corporate boardrooms begins to fracture the moment you analyze the target selection protocol. We were told this weapon was a scalpel, designed for precise strikes against high-value threats. But the leaked evidence reveals a weapon of mass surveillance. The crosshairs quickly shifted from legitimate targets to anyone who dared to hold power accountable. The tipping point arrives in the summer of 2021. A highly classified database hemorrhages from the shadow economy and lands in the hands of an international consortium of investigative journalists. This is not a handful of isolated incidents or a localized abuse of power. The file is a massive ledger of digital crosshairs, a catalog of active and potential targets nominated by the clients of the NSO group. Scrolling through the data reveals the terrifying geometry of the cyber arms trade. The leak contains over 50,000 individual phone numbers, 50,000 pockets carrying compromised devices, 50,000 microphones waiting to be activated. The map of the world begins to light up with red nodes, spreading across borders like a synchronized digital pandemic. The scale of the surveillance network is absolute, bypassing every legal jurisdiction on Earth. When you realize that any one of those 50,000 red nodes could be the device sitting right next to you, the illusion of safety shatters. If the sheer scale of this invisible cyber war blows your mind too, hit the like button right now. To ensure you do not miss the solution to this terrifying digital mystery, subscribe to the channel. And do you think we ever stood a chance against this technology? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. The investigator cross-references this massive list of numbers with forensic analysis from the field. It is a grueling process of matching anonymous digits to human lives. If the corporate mandate was strictly anti-terrorism, the database should reflect that. But the algorithmic sorting reveals a devastating truth. The majority of these targets are not hiding in caves or running smuggling rings. They are working in newsrooms and human rights offices. The data exposes at least 180 journalists, human rights defenders, religious leaders, and political dissidents trapped in the surveillance net. The weapon was deployed against the very people fighting for transparency. Authoritarian regimes simply redefined the word terrorist to include anyone who criticized their administration, using a $50 million cyber weapon to silence dissenting voices before an article could even be published. The audacity of the targeting protocol ignores all diplomatic boundaries. The database lists high-profile political figures, including the sitting president of France and multiple members of the European Parliament. No office is too high, no encrypted network too secure. The operators of the Pegasus system treated the smartphones of sovereign world leaders as open microphones, pulling geopolitical secrets directly from the devices in their suit pockets. The stakes escalate from political espionage to fatal, real-world consequences. The forensic data trail leads directly to the inner circle of Jamal Khashoggi, the murdered Washington Post journalist. The spyware was detected on the devices of individuals closest to him in the months leading up to his assassination. A zero-click infection is no longer just a breach of privacy. It is a digital tracking tag used by executioners to locate their prey. This is the industrialization of transnational repression. Historically, a political dissident could flee their home country and seek geographic asylum thousands of miles away. Borders used to offer physical protection. But in the zero-click era, distance is irrelevant. An intelligence agency can reach across oceans and directly into a private apartment in London or Paris, monitoring a fleeing critic with terrifying, invisible precision. Watch the reaction of a veteran reporter when they realize their device is compromised. They drop the phone on the desk as if the glass and aluminum are physically burning them. It is a visceral, panicked response. The phone is no longer a tool. It is a hostile informant sharing the room. Every contact, every source, every encrypted message they thought was secure has been systematically packaged and delivered to the exact regime they were investigating. The psychological toll on the victims of this surveillance is incalculable. It is classified by forensic psychologists as a severe form of digital assault. The victims describe a permanent state of paranoia, the sickening realization that their most intimate moments were silently observed. The camera lens staring at them from the nightstand was never off. The microphone was always recording. The sanctuary of the private mind has been permanently breached. This level of intrusion shatters the fundamental concept of human trust. You can no longer speak freely in your own kitchen. You cannot take your phone into a confidential meeting. The metadata confirms that the spyware continuously tracked GPS coordinates, monitored battery levels to evade detection, and intercepted keystrokes before encryption could even begin. The device you rely on for survival is the exact instrument orchestrating your downfall. The corporate executives insulated themselves with shell companies, but the blood is undeniably on the code. The 50,000 numbers prove that the shadow economy functions exactly as intended, maximizing profit by enabling global authoritarianism. The digital weapons market is functioning with absolute lethal efficiency. But to maintain this level of silent surveillance, the stolen data must physically travel back to the attackers without triggering any alarms. A hijacked device is useless if the intelligence agency cannot extract the payload. The data must cross international borders, bypassing the most sophisticated network security protocols on Earth, all while remaining completely invisible to your local service provider. The attackers cannot simply email themselves your private life. They need an untraceable, labyrinthine transmission network to launder the stolen information out of your pocket and into their servers. To launder that stolen information out of your pocket, the attackers rely on a mechanism that operates entirely in the shadows. Once Pegasus infects a device, it never communicates directly with the client's headquarters. Doing so would immediately reveal the identity of the attacker. If a phone in Paris sent a direct data packet to an intelligence agency in a hostile state, French telecommunications providers would flag the anomaly in milliseconds. The burn notice would be immediate. Instead, controlling this spyware is like flying a lethal drone on the other side of the planet using a string of invisible mirrors. The operators demand absolute deniability. They deploy a complex architecture known as the Pegasus Anonymizing Transmission Network. This is a global labyrinth of proxy servers specifically designed to bounce your stolen data across multiple international jurisdictions. It is a digital shell game where the ultimate prize is your entire private life. Follow the protocol from the perspective of the network traffic. A tiny encrypted signal silently detaches from a compromised smartphone in a Parisian cafe. It slips past the local cell tower, diving immediately into the massive underwater fiber optic cables stretching beneath the cold Atlantic Ocean. The data is moving at nearly 200,000 miles per second, completely ignoring geographic borders. Your most intimate messages are now functioning as intercontinental cargo. This localized data does not travel in a straight line. It is deliberately routed through anonymous proxy servers buried deep within server farms in Eastern Europe. These way stations act as digital blindfolds. By the time the packet surfaces at a secure command center thousands of miles away, its true origin and final destination have been scrubbed clean. The digital paper trail is obliterated. The investigator monitoring the local network sees only a blur of meaningless traffic. Setting up this ghost network requires a ruthless obsession with operational security. These command and control servers are never leased under the name of a government agency or a recognized corporation. They are frequently registered using fabricated corporate identities and paid for exclusively with cryptocurrency. This guarantees absolute deniability. If an investigative journalist manages to track a server internet protocol address, they find nothing but a dead end in a digital ledger. While the transmission network hides the crime, the spyware itself is ruthlessly extracting the evidence. Pegasus is highly modular, functioning like a Swiss Army knife of digital espionage. The operator can discreetly activate your microphone to record ambient audio of a confidential meeting. They can intercept your encrypted WhatsApp messages the exact moment you type them, reading the text before the application even has a chance to scramble the data. The encryption is entirely bypassed. The surveillance protocol is disturbingly intimate. The code tracks your precise global positioning system coordinates, mapping your daily routines down to the meter. But the most terrifying feature is its artificial patience. The software constantly monitors your device's battery level and temperature. If you pick up the phone, or if the power drain becomes noticeable, the spyware instantly pauses all data transmissions. It waits for you to go to sleep before it resumes bleeding your device. Think about the sheer logistical nightmare this presents for forensic cybersecurity teams. You are hunting a ghost that actively watches you hunting it. The moment you connect a suspect phone to a diagnostic tool, the environment changes. The code is designed to recognize the signatures of forensic analysis. It knows when it is trapped inside a Faraday cage. It knows when the network latency shifts. The weapon possesses a primitive, deeply paranoid survival instinct programmed into its core. When that survival instinct is triggered, the response is swift and catastrophic. If the software detects it is being analyzed by a forensic extraction tool, it executes a hard-coded self-destruct sequence. The same protocol applies if the malware fails to communicate with its command server for a predetermined amount of time. It permanently erases itself from the device's volatile memory, overriding its own code with random noise. The digital corpse dissolves before the autopsy can begin. The investigator staring at the monitor in the windowless lab is left holding an empty shell. The battery drain normalizes. The phantom processes vanish from the system logs. The underwater cables continue to pulse with billions of mundane internet searches, while the crucial evidence evaporates into the digital ether. The command center on the other side of the world simply cuts the cord, burning the compromised node and instantly shifting their focus to the next target on the list. Multiply this single, invisible transaction by the 50,000 targets leaked from the corporate database. We are not looking at a series of isolated hacks. We are witnessing the operation of a parallel, unregulated, global intelligence apparatus. The infrastructure required to maintain this level of continuous, multi-continental data extraction rivals the capabilities of superpower intelligence alliances. But this shadow network answers to no parliament and respects no sovereign borders. You must understand the extreme asymmetry of this modern battlefield. The engineers building these anonymizing transmission networks are not amateurs experimenting in a basement. They are state-sponsored cryptographers and military veterans applying battlefield doctrines to civilian networks. They map the global internet architecture looking for blind spots, exploiting the very protocols designed to keep your banking and healthcare data secure. They turn the infrastructure of trust against you. For years, the original developers maintained absolute control over this terrifying architecture, acting as the sole custodians of the ultimate digital weapon. But maintaining a monopoly on a mathematical exploit is practically impossible. The blueprint for this invisible transmission network has inevitably leaked into the wild. The Pandora's box is wide open, and the global shadow economy is preparing to auction off this exact same capability to the absolute highest bidder on the open market. The open market has arrived, and it does not operate in the shadows. Through the monitor of the open-source investigator, the terminal window looks exactly like a Wall Street trading desk. But these blinking green integers are not stock prices. They are active bounties on the exact vulnerabilities keeping your banking apps and encrypted messengers intact. The monopoly of a single corporation has shattered, leaving behind a chaotic, highly weaponized bazaar. You are watching a real-time auction for the keys to your digital life. The original architect of the zero-click infection opened Pandora's box, proving that remote, invisible extraction is mathematically possible. Now, that proof of concept has triggered a gold rush. A dozen new shadow corporations are aggressively competing to build a faster, deadlier, and completely untraceable digital weapon. The countdown has started, and every operating system update is just a temporary bandage. The paper trail begins with a massive geopolitical intervention. After the catastrophic leak of the targeting database, the United States government stepped in. They placed the original developers on the dreaded Entity List, a regulatory death sentence designed to completely sever the corporation from American technology and investors. On paper, the threat was neutralized. The bureaucracy declared a victory. But the investigator looking at the transaction logs sees a very different reality. Prohibition never kills a lucrative market. It simply forces the supply chain to evolve. The regulatory crackdown did not destroy the surveillance industry. It violently fractured it. Almost immediately, the corporate intelligence vacuum was filled by an aggressive new syndicate of mercenary spyware firms. The paper trail of shell companies migrated away from regulated hubs, setting up deep roots in jurisdictions with deliberately lax oversight and highly flexible export laws. The investigator tracks the flow of capital to new entities like Intellexa and Citrox. These are not rogue hacker collectives. They're polished corporate structures launching aggressive marketing campaigns for their own flagship products. Their primary asset is the Predator spyware, a direct competitor designed to mimic the invisible zero-click capabilities of the original weapon. The global monopoly is officially dead, replaced by a hyper-competitive, unregulated free market. With multiple private intelligence agencies fighting for dominance, the raw materials required to build these weapons became incredibly scarce. The raw material, in this case, is the zero-day exploit, an undocumented flaw in the code that the manufacturer does not yet know about. We are looking at a classic supply and demand curve, but weaponized. The frantic bidding war on the dark market pushed the valuation of these invisible mathematical errors into the absolute stratosphere. By the year 2024, the financial ledgers of exploit brokers revealed a terrifying new baseline. They were publicly offering up to $20 million in clean, untraceable cryptocurrency for a single, reliable, zero-click execution chain targeting iOS or Android devices. Let that number sink in. $20 million for a single text file containing a few lines of logic-breaking code. It is an economic gravity well that alters the entire cybersecurity landscape. This unprecedented influx of unregulated capital created a catastrophic economic incentive. For decades, the tech giants relied on a fragile ecosystem of independent security researchers who hunted for bugs and quietly reported them for modest corporate bounties. But the investigator sees the talent hemorrhage happening in real time. Why accept a $10,000 corporate reward when a shadow broker in Eastern Europe will wire you $20 million by the end of the business day? The greatest cryptographic minds of our generation are being actively recruited by the highest bidder. Brilliant software engineers, the very people capable of fortifying the digital infrastructure, are financially incentivized to keep the vulnerabilities a secret. They are paid millions to craft the lockpicks and sell them to mercenary firms rather than handing them over to the manufacturers to fix the locks. The defense industry is mathematically bleeding out against the offense. Follow the ultimate beneficiaries of this talent drain. Previously, the capacity to remotely, silently hijack a modern encrypted device without a single click was an apex capability. It was a digital nuclear deterrent, restricted exclusively to the massive budgets and supercomputing resources of elite intelligence apparatuses like the National Security Agency or Britain's GCHQ. You had to be a superpower to play in this arena. The barrier to entry was a multi-billion-dollar defense budget. The commercialization of the zero-day market completely obliterated that barrier. The investigators' logs show the terrifying democratization of cyber espionage. Today, sophisticated, military-grade surveillance tools are practically available off the shelf. Any state actor, any autocratic regime, or any sufficiently funded private entity with a few $1 million in offshore accounts can purchase the exact same capabilities that used to define a Tier 1 global superpower. The ticking clock on the exploit broker's terminal is not a metaphor. Once a $20 million zero-day vulnerability is purchased, it has an incredibly short shelf life. The mercenary firm must deploy it immediately and aggressively before the tech giant accidentally discovers the flaw and pushes an automatic security patch. This creates a frantic, high-speed operational tempo. The moment the weapon is armed, it must be fired at as many high-value targets as possible. The investigator watches the digital shrapnel fly. Because the deployment window is so brief, the targeting protocols become utterly reckless. The intelligence agencies buying these subscriptions do not have time for surgical precision. They cast a massive net, infecting diplomats, corporate rivals, and their own citizens in a desperate data grab before the vulnerability closes. The collateral damage of this frantic extraction process is the complete erosion of global privacy. We are analyzing the mechanics of a perpetually escalating arms race. As soon as Apple or Google detects the anomalous memory crashes and pushes an emergency update, the $20 million exploit becomes completely worthless. The shadow weapon dissolves into junk code. But the mercenary firm simply opens the ledger, transfers another $20 million to a 19-year-old savant in an undisclosed location, and the silent cycle of infection immediately begins all over again. The ledger never balances. The demand for absolute surveillance is infinite, and the supply of human error in complex code is practically limitless. Through the exhausted eyes of the open-source investigator, the conclusion is inescapable and incredibly bleak. There is no regulatory agency, no diplomatic treaty, and no line of defensive code capable of stopping this massive influx of dark capital. The weapon is out there, multiplying, and your device is just another node on the grid. The investigation is over. The grid is fully illuminated. I am looking at a city map right now, pulling back from that single infected node we started with. There are millions of lit windows out there, which means there are millions of compromised endpoints. The global data harvest is fully operational, and the silence of this invisible extraction is absolutely deafening. We began this audit searching for a single ghost in the machine. We tracked a malicious image file, isolated a strange battery spike, and documented a forged system process. But as we traced the forensic architecture from the device memory to the shadow economy of cyber arms dealers, the crime scene expanded globally. The final verdict is irrefutable. We are not dealing with a localized breach. The Pegasus protocol forced us to confront a brutal mathematical axiom. In the modern theater of cybersecurity, defense is permanently outmatched by offense. When you hold an operating system woven from tens of millions of lines of code, logical errors are an absolute certainty. The attacker only needs to locate one single, microscopic flaw. The defenders are burdened with the impossible task of patching them all. Look at the sleek glass rectangle sitting near you right now. We willingly integrated these black boxes into the most intimate sectors of our existence. We entrusted them with our biometrics, our financial architecture, and the raw transcripts of our private thoughts. We operated under a fragile social contract, assuming the tech giants actually controlled the environment. That scheme is now thoroughly exposed. The corporate entities that sold us these devices marketed the illusion of an impenetrable digital fortress. But this investigation has proven that your privacy is nothing more than a commercial marketing construct. In the cold reality of the zero-day market, your device is a loaded weapon pointed directly at your life, waiting for a mercenary broker to pull the trigger. The trail of accountability went totally cold. You might calculate that you are far too insignificant to be targeted by a military-grade cyberweapon. That is a highly dangerous miscalculation. The democratization of these exploits means the crosshairs are no longer reserved for presidents or dissident journalists. The intelligence net is cast incredibly wide, and the financial cost of deploying a zero-click infection is dropping every single day. I have to deliver the final report on the state of our digital reality in the year 2026. Absolute security simply does not exist. Antivirus software is a cosmetic bandage on a structural hemorrhage. The only viable survival strategy left is strict operational security. You must operate under the permanent assumption that your hardware is already compromised and adjust your behavior accordingly. You cannot simply unplug. That is the true genius of the modern surveillance architecture. To participate in the contemporary economy, to maintain a career, or to simply navigate a modern city, you are forced to carry the very instrument of your own tracking. Opting out of the digital grid means opting out of society itself. The system is perfectly sealed, and we are trapped completely inside the perimeter. We spent hours digging through hexadecimal code and network packet captures, attempting to understand how the attackers broke in. But the true horror of this forensic audit is not the technological sophistication of the forced entry. The Turing-complete machines built inside our memory banks are terrifying, but they are just the mechanics of the crime. The real tragedy lies in the psychology of the victim. The final verdict on human privacy is profoundly bleak. The architects of the global surveillance state did not need to deploy a secret police force to install listening devices in our homes. They did not need to force cameras into our bedrooms or mandate government tracking beacons. We eagerly stood in line to purchase them. We charged their batteries every night, and we willingly carry them in our pockets. I'm watching the server racks now. In dark, quiet rooms across the globe, thousands of routers are blinking relentlessly, processing the endless stream of stolen metadata. The data harvest never sleeps. Every keystroke, every location ping, every whispered conversation is compiled into a permanent dossier by an algorithmic ghost we can neither see nor fight. The investigation file remains open indefinitely. We have mapped the invisible architecture of this digital pandemic, but this forensic audit relies on your active participation. If this investigation shattered your illusions and gave you a new operational perspective, hit the like button. That metric is how we confirm our intelligence gathering is breaking through the noise. Subscribe to the channel to maintain your security clearance and continue the research with us. The network traffic continues to flow, an invisible river of our closely guarded secrets, feeding a shadow economy that profits from our absolute vulnerability. You are now aware of the silent tripwires surrounding you, and that knowledge is the only genuine shield you have left in a profoundly compromised world. Trust nothing, verify everything, and watch your screens carefully. This is the lead investigator, signing off.